Welcome to Our Table, Our Talk, a program of the City of Bloomington's Community and Family Resources Department. In honor of Black History Month, we'll be discussing issues for and about African Americans living in Bloomington. This is by no means meant to be a conversation just for African Americans, but is designed to spark conversations throughout the community. Today we'll be talking about what it means to be a good ally. I'm going to start by asking my guest, what is an ally? What does that mean to you?
Being a good ally to me, I think, is being able to, respect the space that you're going into. I think that's what I was trying to get at, because, and respecting the space and slow to respond. Oftentimes, sometimes when you are, being accused of certain things, it's one that's like, oh my God, that's not me, that's not what I'm doing. It's just like, but understand this is where this person is coming from. This is how they are feeling. So listening and respecting this place that you are is a good start to being an ally.
Being an ally, Marianne?
Yeah, and there's when you talk about space, I was thinking there's a certain even intention to get yourself out of your space where you're comfortable and making sure you're in other spaces where you might not know exactly how things are going or what the culture is, but you go in there. And for me, it's a lot of it's for me to be willing to have my agenda change, and particularly the agendas I'm not even aware of. And
so what's the active part of allyship? Does it mean going out advocating for people? Does it mean what does that mean when you talk about being an ally?
I think that's a later stage. I think the listening is first. Listening with intention, listening not to respond, but to understand. And then gaining information, maybe gaining more information than that conversation brings out, getting more information, and then maybe thinking of an action plan in concert with the folks you're trying to support. So I think that, but again, that shouldn't be the first thing, I don't think. It really is about listening to understand what is it like for you in this community? What is it like for someone who might be different from me? Gender, orientation, race, religion. Tell me about your experience.
And so I know that we can be allies individually, but we can also be allies corporately. And I know at the Unitarian Universalist Church, that is one of the values that you all hold. And does that come from the church's teachings? Does that come from the leadership? Like how does that evolve?
I think it's a both and in particular the sense of what I'm hearing in this is not having our own agenda, but also, Doug, you mentioned like forming an action plan with someone else and trying to meet with community organizations and individuals to see what work is needed, as opposed to walking in and saying, this is the work I'm going to do. This is how it's going to go. So there's a great unknown, and that's one of the things I think our organization, many organizations can do, is be okay with that uncertainty as we do it together.
Yeah.
I want to get back to the issue of space because I hadn't thought about that, but I'm a member at St. Thomas Lutheran Church, which is right next door to Beth Shalom, the Jewish Center, and then University Baptist. We sort of share the same amount of property. And there's a wonderful story about how the folks at St. Thomas came to the rescue of the congregation at Beth Shalom when a neo-Nazi tried to torch that place many years ago. But again, it's about getting into that space, and we've done that over the years with joint worship services, joint meals, Habitat for Humanity projects, but we've taken ourselves out of our sacred space and been in each other's, and that's really important. Yeah.
But when you talk about sacred space too, Doug, I think about our relationship that goes back, I don't even know how many years.
20 at least.
At least 20.
Yeah.
And going to panels together and working on different issues and projects together. And I know your story and you know my story, and we've shared stories. And so that gets me to that issue of trust. And I think, when someone says to me, who do you know that's going to be down for you? I can think of Doug almost immediately. And I don't know that it was even conscious that we were doing it, as much as we were just in some of the same spaces and working on some of the same issues.
Well, I often tell the story of the tragedy of the shooting of Wan Jun-yoon, 1999, and the communities that came together to support each other because of the hate crime literature that was being distributed, the gay community, the Jewish community, the black community, the Asian community. And if there was any silver lining in all of that, it was the friendships that formed out of that,
Yes.
that I think have really strengthened this community in ways that we couldn't have imagined. Significant friendships that have bridged gaps that probably existed. Conversations on Race, a program that we were part of.
And it brought us together in a way. I sometimes when you have a common opponent, I hate to use the word enemy, but when you have a common opponent, that does bring you together. But all the time it's not there, and what brought you to where you are about being allies to people who are different from you?
It's something I seemed to have when I was younger, and I felt different. I didn't know I was gay. I didn't even understand what that would mean, but I think I understood that, and even I can remember in school, like, I had a certain strength, and I could empower others by doing that, and to be honest, where it really came to the forefront for me was in college. And I worked in the residence hall systems, and suddenly I was friends with a lot of people who were very different from me. And my sense is the stronger my relationship, and this is with most social justice issues, then it becomes I cannot not do this. So it's not like, dun dun dun, I'm gonna be an ally. It's like, no, this is strong enough now, and I have entered this world that I cannot not do this. And once I'm there, that's unstoppable. And that's, I think, what we try to do with the congregation, education and pieces like that, where people then, it's like, not, oh, you have to go out and do this, but get people to the place they cannot not do this.
Yeah.
And that's a powerful place.
And I think that's the thing about knowing people as people. You don't know people as groups. I don't know people as members of the LGBTQ community or black people or white people, but I know Marianne and I know Doug and I know Jennifer and I know Scott, and so you can't do things that I don't like to any of you, and I'm gonna stand for you, and by extension, all of those people in your group,
So Beverly, to that point, one of the things that strikes me with being an ally is not going after that work to be an ally, but to have good, real relationship, right? So that
That's a good point.
that trust can be built.
Absolutely good point. And I know for myself, how I got to this point is back in 2016, not even after 24 hours after the election, I just here minding my own business in this community. And I, was walking across the street, going to the store, and there was a truck that came up, and I was on my phone, and I jumped up because I heard some scurrying and some screeching tires, and I looked up, and there was this guy that was in the car or in the truck, and he goes, bad derogatory words, and called me the N-word, called me the B-word, and said that Trump was going to deport me back to Africa. And so at the time that it happened, I was just like, oh, okay. And I just kept walking, and I didn't think about it. And then I got in the store, and I just started visibly shaking. And then I couldn't even buy what I was trying to buy, and I left. And I just remember driving home, just thinking, oh my goodness, oh my goodness, oh my goodness. And I got home and, opened up the door, and I instantly just started crying. And my husband and my kids were looking around and goes, what's wrong? What's wrong? Did something happen? What's wrong? And I just couldn't formulate the words that were coming out. And it was just like, okay. And, we had talked about, after the election, we woke up and said, what does this mean? Because we're all fearful and scared of, what was going to be the new agenda now that this was happening. And, he encouraged me and was like, I think you should write about it. I think you should be very careful. And, look at what will happen from this. It could be a teaching moment for people. And then, I'd shared my experience on Facebook, and I had, put it out there, and not to realize that my experience was going to be shared as much as it was. Sean King, who is very prominent, somehow got a hold of my story and shared it. And from that, I got a slew of messages. Some really good messages, some really not so good messages, even from members of the community. But that is where I realized that, there were people that were truly saying that they were here for me. And even after that moment happened is, trying to come and still saying, hey, are you okay? What can we do for you? That kind of thing. And to me, it was just like, wow, truly being an ally is listening and, trying to respect the space and understand that being an ally definitely means it's some hard, uncomfortable positions and friendships that will end and family issues that will come from that.
Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry.
I was just going to say, the longer I live, the more I realize the power of telling stories. And again, for people to listen to our stories changes hearts, minds. I'm pretty convinced that the stories that we heard in the last week or two from common citizens is what finally got the government to do what they should have done a long time ago in terms of the shutdown. But it was those individual stories that kept coming that began to open the eyes of the legislators.
Yeah, I think you're probably right. And as you were talking, Jennifer, I remember, I think it was a couple of years ago, we had a Muslim woman who was sitting outside her restaurant in her hijab and was attacked by someone. And I remember at that point thinking, so many people came forward immediately. There were people eating in the restaurant. There were women sitting with scarves on their heads, which, again, what does allyship really look like? And I always wonder, is it for the moment? Is it, and in that moment, is that even still a good thing? Is that support in that moment? But after that 2 days or after that week, then what? Because the people are still here and the issues are still here. And I think so many times people think either that doesn't happen in Bloomington, you must have been doing something to make that happen, because this is Bloomington. And so I don't know. You can't tell people how to be well, maybe you can tell people how to be an ally, I don't know. But there are also those things that are, I think, poor ways to be not supportive, but just poor ways to function. And that one and done kind of thing is, because the issue doesn't go away and you are not changed when you go and you sit someplace or you wear a scarf or you hold a sign or you mark. That doesn't change you because you still get to go back to your comfortable existence.
There was a fascinating story on NPR as I was driving in this morning about the link between diversity and creativity. It was really powerful to say that people who are more open to differences and to being allies, in a sense, that's at least how I was interpreting it, are more creative people. And they gave some examples, but I just thought, what an interesting link. Life is richer, I think, and that's certainly been my experience. And then if we're going to talk about an action plan or something, that creativity bubbles out of that linkage, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
I never thought of it like that, and it was a powerful analogy.
Beverly, your point about, I think, folks who want to be allies, who kind of come from a privileged place, being able to go back to that comfort spot. And also, it's so hard to imagine the sort of accumulation of trauma and stress that comes with oppression. That's the piece of, for me, I strive not to use the word good ally, but being better at that, at being in relationship. And it's hard. I recognize the first few times I understood my difference in any number of ways, and the sense that you can't turn that off, and you have to engage with it on a daily level, whereas privilege had enabled me to do so in so many other ways. And so that's one of the things that I think organizations can do, people can do, is keep calling people back, even outside of a difficult moment. Why is this important? Not just Martin Luther King Day or February,
Right.
but November,
Yes,
or
absolutely.
whatever.
Yeah.
And for me, we're a culture that, and it's becoming more so based on a speed. Let's get to the next thing. Let's get to the next thing. Even, we just had something about memes that used to last like maybe a week. Now they don't even last that long. And I find that what resonated was, with what you were saying, is something I say when after somebody has died. And people want to just do the grief thing.
Yeah.
Okay, it's been 3 days, and I often say, circle back to that person and that family 3 months from now, 6 months from now, 9 months, because that's when some of that's going to settle in. And I feel that when I think of the Muslim woman with the hijab, that circle back 3 months from now, 6 months. As a matter of fact, I tend not to go in right away unless it's immediately in front of me. And it's going to happen. It's part of our culture, so it's very countercultural to ask people to slow down enough, I think, to be with the pain.
And
You know,
grief,
And
And
grief.
grief.
Yeah.
right?
I mean, it really does come to
It
that.
does.
You
Yeah.
grieve with that person. I think of you going back to your house.
Yeah.
I think of you 3 months later, right? And to be with that person through those cycles that we normally go through when there's been a trauma or a hate crime. And I was telling Doug, I used to work with the hate crimes on campus, and part of what we did was, in our response, is first go in and deal with it, but then go back for the education. And so I just, that coming back to that relationship, because it's going to change.
Yeah, and I think to that point, I mean, I think part of being an ally is understanding that you're voluntarily walking into a painful space. You know, the trauma that different people have felt, being oppressed or discriminated against, it is painful, but it's a pain that people live with 24/7.
That's right.
And so you walk into that space, and it doesn't go away when you leave, you know, and so it's hard to, I think, very difficult to voluntarily continue to circle back.
Yes.
To that space, yeah.
And
Relating
remember-
it to death, I think that's a good
Yeah,
thing.
and remembering it's not about me if I'm the ally.
Right.
Yes.
And it's
Yeah.
not
That
about
is
my
Key
pain.
point.
Yeah.
That is such a key point.
It's holding that space.
Absolutely.
And as in the situations where someone has died, it's often not about saying the right thing or saying anything.
Exactly.
Or just being present.
Being present, yeah.
I would take this to a weird flip side I hadn't thought about before, which is the other element of coming back months later is that in these moments where something bad happened, I'm thinking of the story with the restaurant, your story, you know, there can be this outcry towards the person who did this inappropriate, oppressive thing. And in that moment, like it's there in that righteous anger, but if we don't come back to it, are they going to learn to change their behavior
That's right.
on a deeper level?
Yeah.
So there's the part of showing up for our communities we're in allyship with, but also in changing the bigger culture.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Circling back is definitely something that is a big deal because oftentimes I think ally is one of those trendy words like progressive right now.
Yes.
It's like, oh, I'm an ally and I'm in the moment. And so it's like, oh, okay, you know, but it's just truly understanding that. And also being an ally is knowing the privilege that comes with it and checking that. That is one of the biggest things is because, you know, you as, you know, having that privilege is using it and stepping in when you're seeing something that is becoming an issue. When I would, you know, for example, if I, you know, would go to a store and be followed and somebody is sitting there watching me get followed, using that privilege and checking it at the moment and stepping in and saying, is there, you know, something? Because oftentimes, as much as I want to say what I really want to say, I can't.
You can't. That's right.
I can't, especially because, you know, I have children and I'm around, and there are things that happen where, I want to say, but should I say it? And if I do say it, how is it going to be perceived? But stepping in and seeing something that's happening and saying, do we have a problem? That is one of the things that you can do as far as being an ally.
Yeah, that reminds me of a situation, Doug, you knew my late husband, but whenever he would see, and we didn't live here, but we lived in another space, whenever he would see African American men stopped by the police, I don't care where we were, he would always stop and get out and say, is there something I can help with? Used to scare me to death, you know, but I mean, he always did that. And it's just sort of like, you know, now he was African American. I don't know now in this day and time if he would be doing it, but that was one of the things that he would do. And I think I understand it better now than I did, you know, 20, 25 years ago. Yeah. So I have some Facebook friends, people that I know, who I think consider themselves allies, but they have a tendency to tell whether it's African Americans or Latinos and not so much, I don't think I haven't experienced it with the LGBTQ community, but how they should feel, you know. Well, this isn't that bad, or this, you know, and it's sort of like, no, because, to me, that's not allyship, that is, I don't know what that is. Our producer said we can't say.
We'll say messed up.
It's messed
Use whatever word you want
up.
there.
Yeah, but you know, they want to tell you how you should feel, or you know, it's not that bad, and it's very patronizing, and then get offended if you try to correct that. And one of the things, I don't know if we said it on or off camera, but we were saying, you know, part of being a better ally is understanding when someone calls you on something, you know, that, oh, I made a mistake, I'm sorry I made that mistake, or whatever. I mean, and it's okay, because again, go back to the trust thing, if the trust is there, then you know that it's all coming from a good space.
I have a great example. I was asked to moderate a panel at the Black Culture Center with a black pastor who was very homophobic, and I've sat between him and a black gay student. And at some point the conversation moved to the black pastor said to the student, you can't change your skin color, but you can change your orientation. And the student, with a great deal of respect, turned to the pastor and said, you have a right to speak your truth. You don't have a right to speak my truth.
Yes.
And it was powerful, and people came up to him afterward, including people from this man's congregation, who said, that was really helpful for me to hear you say.
That should be our national slogan.
Yeah.
You know?
That is such a good point.
You have
I
a right
love
to
that.
speak your
Yeah.
truth, but you don't have a right to speak mine. It was a wonderful moment. Yeah.
Yeah, that sounds good. I mean, and I also think it's important too for those of us who feel that we are allies and better allies. I'm going to keep using that, better allies. That it's okay not to be in a space with people. I mean, because there are times, whether you're whoever you are, women, African Americans, men, whatever, that they want to be together. And maybe, you know, you're not there, and it's okay. And again, it's not about you, you know, it's about them. And I have found, you know, people that want to be in every space. Yeah.
Yes.
I just saw a Holy Ghost moment over here.
I just and the sun just came out when you said that too, and I was like, yes, this is so, because I was thinking about that. I was like, oh, I got those Facebook friends too, right? That just, and there's a problem when you are an ally and your voice is so much louder than mine.
Yes.
That is a huge problem that I've seen in a recent year, and it's like, you don't get to speak for me. You need to listen to what it is that I'm saying, and I hope you would understand that, but you don't get to speak for me, and you don't get to, you know, it's like what you just said, you don't get to speak my truth. You can understand it, and it's also not my job to educate you. That's you, and that's how you are becoming a better ally, is, you know, educating yourself. Especially when you're coming into the space. But the biggest thing that I've seen so much is the voice of the person being the ally is way more bigger and tries to be so much more powerful than those that are
Well, and then
oppressed.
they try to school the person
and it's like,
that
not
they want
today.
to be the ally for, and really feel offense when you say, no, you can't do that.
Yes.
Luckily, Doug, I've never had that issue with you.
Yes.
Not yet.
So if we have people out there that are watching this on Facebook or YouTube, and they want to become better allies, they either have that as a value or something that they want to do. What would you recommend for them?
You just did something I want to comment on, because you were using the word humble before, and that comes from the same root as the word humor. That was just a fun moment, and I think when humor is appropriate, it can really break down some barriers. And so I just think having that in your toolbox, and that's tough because a lot of humor is inappropriate. I'm very mindful of that, but that was appropriate, and it was a nice moment, and sometimes that humbles us. So I'm not sure, I think I took away from what you were asking.
That's fine, yeah.
Yeah. I think we have lost, as a society, the art of listening. I mean, to really listen, as you said, to be changed and to hear. And particularly if we're looking at the role of ally, even within a particular group, African American, LGBTQ, you're going to have different truths within that.
That's true.
Good
So there's
point.
not this objective
Truth.
truth.
Yeah.
And so for each person you are sitting down with, a new truth is going to come. And I'll tell you, that takes time. It takes slowing down. And I feel like, and this is certainly part of my work, is helping people slow down. And I remember asking somebody one time, why is it that as a society we have such a hard time slowing down? Because we'll grieve. It's in us. There are a lot of painful things in the society, and if we slow down to really have a conversation, a real one that goes beyond this, gets here.
So maybe this is a good opportunity to say thank you for bringing us together to listen to each other, and hopefully the folks who are listening in on this at some point will find some truth, some value.
I thank you all for being here. I love this community. You all are one of the reasons that I do love Bloomington, and but I don't idealize Bloomington. I know that the things that happen in Chicago and Indianapolis and Detroit happen in Bloomington too, but I think we're different because we're small enough that we all do know one another, and we can be there to support one another. So I thank you all for honoring us with your time. And to our audience, if you have liked what we talked about today, don't forget to like, comment, and share us on Facebook. Thank you so much for joining Our Table, Our Talk.
One of the best dates I've been on.
See, it's just even when
I'm
you
going
don't
to
know
tell
what
Marty
the
how
date
to
is.
do this.